Political analyst Moeletsi Mbeki says the ANC has chosen to consume rather than grow the South African economy. He was speaking in a webinar hosted by PSG Konsult. Mbeki said that the ANC plays clever politics, zeroing in on a wider voter base that benefits the most from keeping the party in power. This is while opposition parties have failed to convince voters that they'll do a better job. He joins us now for more on some of his views. Mr. Mbeki, a very good evening to you. A pleasure to have you on the show. Interesting that, part of what you were speaking about it, and perhaps it will be good for you to give us the context there in terms of your comments that you're making, that the ANC has effectively chosen to put the burden on saving or investment for this country on coming generations, while this generation is intent on emptying the kitty as much as possible.
Yes, Kathy, the context was the high unemployment in South Africa and the high levels of poverty in South Africa. We have over half of our population living in poverty, and something like 40% of our able-bodied people who want to work unable to work because the economy is not creating jobs for them. So the context, the question which I was asked is, why is the government not pursuing policies of economic growth? Because in order to overcome unemployment, you need economic growth. In order to overcome poverty, you need people to be employed. So it was in that context when I pointed out that actually the ANC government, its priority is consumption, its priority is not investment and not economic growth. And consumption, of course, you cannot both grow an economy and consume a lot at the same time. And consumption in the context of the ANC is very important, because the primary voters for the ANC are the poor South Africans. So it gives the poor South Africans social grants, which is consumption. Instead of job creation, it gives them social welfare. And as we saw during the crisis of COVID-19, it's now gone downstream, literally, and is now giving out food parcels. So the South African strategy, the government economic strategy, is one of promoting consumption rather than promoting investment.
Of course, when one looks at just some of the promises that have been made over the last couple of years, if we just take a look at what the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, has been promising South Africans, is that there will be an increase in job creation. Are you saying that when you look at what the government has said versus how its spending patterns have continued, it's practically impossible to achieve the kind of job creation numbers that have been set down as targets, and yet not putting money in the right places?
Absolutely. If you don't invest, for example, you don't have the electricity. And if you don't have electricity, then your factories don't run properly. They start and they stop and so on. So you have a very inefficient economy. So what we're seeing happening in Eskom, and I had power cut in my own home this afternoon for 2 hours. And this has been going on for many, many years because of lack of investment, because the resources that should be going to investment are being taken to consumption. For example, we have the highest paid civil service in the world as a percentage of gross domestic product. Now, that salary that goes to pay the civil service should have been going into building factories. Similar countries to South Africa pay their civil service only 6% of their GDP. We pay our civil service between 12 and 14% of our gross domestic product, which is what then drives the consumption, is these hugely high salaries that we have in the South African economy.
How do you propose that we get out of this situation? Because the reality is that we now have more people that are going to be dependent on government support one way or the other. Because, while we have this economic crisis unfolding, there's very much social issues that are brewing. And we simply cannot afford to have the numbers of people right now who are out of work and not being supported in any way continue.
Well, the problem of unemployment in South Africa did not start last year with COVID-19. We had over 30% of unemployment long before COVID-19 came along. And this was because of lack of investment. If you take our mining industry, for example, in South Africa, in the last 10, 15 years, the mining industry has lost nearly 500,000 jobs. And when you look closely as to why, it's because there is no investment in the mining industry in order to find new mineral assets, in order to develop new mines. So that's what investment means. If you don't create new jobs, you don't invest in new mines, in new factories, in new highways, then your people are unemployed, and the poverty will carry on as we are seeing it carrying on. It will carry on. It was there before COVID-19. It will be there after COVID-19.
Of course, as you say this, we also know that the president made several announcements around infrastructure development that also form part of his economic recovery plan. Do you have confidence in those to deliver a different set of outcomes, even though, we don't really have many details of when most of those plans might be implemented?
No, I have no confidence. The issue of infrastructure investment in South Africa is an old story which has not been implemented. To give you an example, our railway infrastructure is ancient, is very old. Our railway equipment, some of it, our locomotives, are as old as 40 years old. And there has been no investment. That is infrastructure. And where is the government going to get the money from to build this infrastructure? And the municipalities, the backbone of infrastructure are the municipalities. The municipalities don't have the engineers and the architects who they employed, who are the people who are going to initiate the infrastructures that you are going to build. So this is all talk. And as they say, talk is cheap.
There have been warnings over the years about South Africa potentially reaching a fiscal cliff. If the situation, the economic situation that we're facing doesn't change, do you foresee that as a possibility? So if all the variables that you've just talked about do not get better, what is the likely outcome?
Well, what is the likely outcome? Yes, it is the fiscal cliff, in the sense that if your economy is not growing, but your expenditures are growing, then you have to borrow. And if you borrow, you need to service the debt that you are borrowing. So there is, in fact, a statement which was released yesterday by one of the rating agencies, Moody's, which gave the South African government a strong warning that it faces another downgrade deeper into junk status if it does not grow the economy. And the government is expecting that our debt level will be 95% of gross domestic product in 2023-24. But Moody's says it will be 100% by next year. So you can see that our economy is in deep trouble, because if the government's revenues are devoted to paying salaries and to paying debt service and a little bit of social welfare, then your economy is really in trouble.
In your view, what does the president have to announce or say tomorrow as an indication of turning the situation around?
Well, I have no idea what the president has to say that anyone will believe. Uh, he told us when he was deputy president, and he had a war room running ESCOM, that all our problems will be over in 18 months. As I say, I had a power cut in my home this afternoon. So I have no idea what the president has to say tomorrow that anyone will believe.
So how do we begin to change the situation? Because if I take at least your analysis into account, it to me describes like we are just on on this railway and completely out of control with no way of changing what could well be a crash into whatever lies ahead.
Yes, we are definitely heading for this train smash in South Africa in terms of our public finances, uh, and that is the reality that we're faced with, that the country is faced with. And well, I hope the president has something different to say in the State of the Nation address that's different from what he has been saying all along. But there has been lots of advice to him. The business community, for example, has said to the president that state-owned enterprises that are inefficient, that are dependent on government financing, that are being spoon-fed by the taxpayers should be closed down or sold off. Now, let's see tomorrow whether the president will tell us what he is going to do about these state-owned enterprises.
Political analyst Moeletsi Mbeki, we're going to leave it there for tonight. Thank you so much for your time.